The first explosion shook the mining colony of Veltri 7 just before dawn. Captain Derek Shaw was drinking his morning coffee when the alarm started screaming through the corridors. He dropped his cup and ran. By the time he reached the command center, 2 more explosions had rocked the facility. The massive view screen showed something that made his blood run cold. Ships. Dozens of them. Dark vessels shaped like insects, descending through the orange clouds of the planet's atmosphere. "Vrecna Dominion," said Commander Lisa Park, already at her station. Her voice was calm, but Shaw could see the tension in her shoulders. "They're not supposed to be anywhere near this sector." "Someone forgot to tell them that," Shaw replied. He turned to his communication officer. "Get me a count on civilian population." 412 Corvani miners, sir. 87 human workers. Plus our security team of 30. 30 soldiers. Shaw had 30 soldiers to defend over 500 people against a Vrecna invasion fleet. Ambassador Kieth rushed into the command center, his blue feathers ruffled with panic. The elderly Corvani diplomat had lived through many crises in his long life, but Shaw could see genuine fear in his golden eyes. "Captain Shaw, what is happening?" "Those ships. The Vrecna Dominion is attacking, Ambassador. I need you to begin evacuation procedures immediately. Get your people to the underground shelters." "But why?" "We are a mining colony. We have nothing they could want." Commander Park answered without looking up from her screen. "They want territory, Ambassador. They want to expand, and this sector is in their way. Your people, our people, we're just obstacles to them." The first wave of Vrecna ground troops landed 20 minutes later. Shaw watched through the external cameras as hundreds of insectoid soldiers poured out of dropships, their dark armor gleaming in the weak sunlight. They moved with terrible coordination, like ants swarming toward food. Shaw's 30 soldiers met them at the colony's outer perimeter. The fighting was brutal from the first moment. Human rifles cracked against Vrecna energy weapons. Men and women fell on both sides, but the humans held their ground. "They're testing us," Shaw said, watching the battle unfold. "Probing our defenses. They'll find out we don't break easily." Park replied. By midday, the first assault had been pushed back. Shaw had lost 3 soldiers. The Vrecna had lost perhaps 50. But there were always more Vrecna. Their ships continued to circle overhead, and Shaw knew the real attack hadn't even begun yet. Ambassador Kieth found Shaw during a brief pause in the fighting. The old Corvani's feathers had turned pale with stress, and his hands trembled as he spoke. "I have contacted the Galactic Council," he said. "I have requested emergency reinforcements." Shaw nodded. "Good. What did they say?" "They are discussing the matter." "Discussing." Shaw almost laughed. "We're being invaded, and they're discussing it." "The council moves slowly, Captain. There are procedures, protocols. Ambassador, with respect, we don't have time for procedures." "How long until they send help?" Kieth's expression fell. "They have promised a peacekeeping force of 50 soldiers. They will arrive in 6 days." 6 days. Shaw turned away so the ambassador wouldn't see his face. 6 days of holding against an enemy that outnumbered them 20 to 1, maybe more. And even then, 50 soldiers wouldn't change anything. 50 soldiers was a political gesture, not a rescue. "I understand, Ambassador. Thank you for trying." After Kiev left, Commander Park approached Shaw quietly. She had a look in her eyes that Shaw had learned to recognize over their years of service together. She was planning something. "The Council's response isn't good enough," she said. "I know. I've sent a separate transmission. Priority 1, encrypted, directly to Earth Command." Shaw stared at her. "That's outside the chain of command. The Council won't like it." "The Council isn't dying here, Captain." "We are." Park's voice was hard as steel. "I've explained our situation in detail. Civilian population enemy strength, strategic value of the sector. I've requested immediate military assistance. And if Earth Command decides the Council's response is sufficient? Park smiled slightly. They won't. Trust me. The second Vrekner assault came at sunset. This time they attacked from 3 directions at once, trying to overwhelm the human defensive positions. Shaw fought alongside his soldiers, his rifle hot in his hands, his throat raw from shouting orders. They held. Barely. By the time the Vrekner pulled back again, Shaw had lost 5 more soldiers. 22 remained, plus himself, plus Commander Park. 24 humans against an army. That night, Shaw gathered his surviving troops in the command center. Their faces were exhausted, streaked with dirt and blood. Some had bandages wrapped around wounds that should have sent them to medical beds. But they stood ready, waiting for his words. The Galactic Council is sending reinforcements, Shaw told them. 50 soldiers. They'll arrive in 6 days. No one spoke, but Shaw could see the despair in their eyes. 6 days was a lifetime. 6 days was forever. I won't lie to you, Shaw continued. The odds are bad. The Vrekner have numbers, ships, and time on their side. But we have something they don't understand. We have each other. And we have 500 innocent people counting on us to keep them alive. He paused, looking at each face in turn. We hold this colony. We hold it for 6 days, or we hold it until we can't hold it anymore. That's the mission. That's what we do. A young sergeant named Ryan Cole stepped forward. We're with you, Captain. Every one of us. The others nodded, their fear transforming into determination. Shaw felt pride swell in his chest. These were his people. These were humans. After the meeting, Commander Park found Shaw on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. The Vrekner ships were visible as dark shadows against the night sky, circling like vultures. You didn't tell them about your transmission to Earth, Shaw said. No. Why not? Park was quiet for a moment. Because I don't want to give them false hope. Earth might not respond in time. They might not respond at all. But if they do. Park's smile returned, mysterious and knowing. Then the Vrekna are going to learn a very important lesson about humanity. Shaw looked at her curiously, but she said nothing more. She simply watched the stars, waiting for something that might never come. Above the colony, the Vrekna fleet prepared for another assault. They had calculated the human numbers, analyzed their weapons, predicted their tactics. By their estimation, the colony would fall within 4 days. 5 at most. They had no idea what was coming. 3 days into the siege, the colony's main shield generator failed. Sergeant Ryan Cole was on patrol when he heard the deep hum die away, replaced by an awful silence. Without shields, they were exposed to orbital bombardment. Without shields, they were dead. All units, fall back to secondary positions. Captain Shaw's voice crackled over the radio. The Vrekner will hit us hard now. Dig in and hold. Cole gathered his squad and moved through the damaged corridors of the mining facility. Dust hung in the air from collapsed ceilings. Emergency lights cast red shadows across everything. The colony that had once been a place of peaceful work had become a fortress of desperate survival. Medic Hannah Torres met them at the secondary command post. Her uniform was stained with blood, none of it her own. She had been working without sleep for 2 days, keeping wounded soldiers alive with supplies that were almost gone. How many can still fight? She asked Cole. 14 in my unit. 2 walking wounded. The rest. He didn't finish. Torres nodded, her face showing no emotion. She had learned to hide her feelings. Showing despair now would only make things worse. Keep them alive, Sergeant. That's all we can do. The Vrekner attacked within the hour. Without shields, They could land their dropships directly inside the colony's outer perimeter. Hundreds of insectoid warriors poured through breaches in the walls, their mandibles clicking with hunger for victory. Cole and his squad held a corridor junction that led to the civilian shelters. The fighting was close and brutal. Vrecna soldiers fell in waves, but more always came behind them. Cole's rifle grew so hot from continuous fire that it burned his hands through his gloves. He didn't stop shooting by the time the assault ended. Cole had lost 3 more soldiers. His squad was down to 11. They had killed perhaps 200 Vrecna, but the enemy had thousands more in the underground shelters. Ambassador Kieth moved among his people, trying to bring comfort where there was little to give. The Kovani huddled together, their feathers dull with fear and exhaustion. Children clung to their parents, asking questions that had no good answers. When will we be safe? A young Corvani asked. Soon, Kieth told him, though he didn't believe it himself. The humans are protecting us. They will keep us safe. Elder Sela, one of the oldest Corvani on the colony, approached the ambassador. Unlike the others, she had refused to simply hide and wait. She had been helping Torres in the medical bay, using her knowledge of Corvani healing arts to assist with the wounded. Ambassador, she said quietly, I have seen the human casualties. They are dying for us. How many more will fall before this is over? Kieth had no answer. The guilt that had been building in his chest grew heavier. He was the one who had invited humans to Veltri 7. He was the one who had promised them a peaceful assignment, a simple mining operation. Now they were bleeding and dying because of his mistake. Commander Park found him sitting alone in a storage room, his head in his hands. She sat down beside him without speaking. I did this, Kieth finally said. I brought your people here. I told them they would be safe. You didn't do this, Ambassador. The Vrecna did this. But your soldiers are doing exactly what they signed up to do. Park's voice was gentle but firm. We don't abandon our friends, Ambassador. That's not how humans work. Your people needed help, and we came. What happens next isn't your fault. Kieth looked at her with ancient, weary eyes. You could have evacuated. When the attack began, you could have taken your people and left. The Vrecna wanted the colony, not human lives. And leave your people to die? Park shook her head. No, that's not who we are. Why? We are not your species. We are not your family. Park was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Ambassador, humans have a saying. Family isn't just about blood. It's about choice. We chose to be here. We chose to stand with you. That makes you family. Above ground, the fighting continued through the night. Captain Shaw moved from position to position, checking on his soldiers, helping where he could. He had taken a wound to his left arm during the last assault, but Torres had patched it up and he kept fighting. There was no choice. During a brief pause in the attacks, Shaw intercepted a Vrecna transmission. His communication officer translated it quickly, and what Shaw heard made him both angry and hopeful. They think we're almost finished, he told Park. Their commander has reported to their fleet that human resistance is crumbling. They expect to take the colony within 2 days. Let them think that, Park replied. Overconfidence is a weakness. 2 days, Lisa. Can we last 2 more days? Park checked their datapad, looking at numbers that only she could see. We can last longer than they expect. Humans always can. That night, in a moment of quiet, Sergeant Cole found himself sharing a meal with some of the Corvani refugees. His rations were nearly gone, but he had saved 1 protein bar. A small Corvani child sat nearby, watching him with wide, hungry eyes. Cole broke the bar in half and offered 1 piece to the child. The young Corvani looked at him with surprise, then slowly reached out and took the food. Thank you, the child said in broken English. You're welcome, kid. Cole managed a tired smile. We're going to get through this. I promise." It was a promise he had no right to make. But in that moment, looking at that small, frightened face, Cole meant every word. He would die before he let the Vrecna hurt this child. He would die before he let them hurt any of these people. On the fourth morning, just before dawn, the colony's sensors detected something strange. A massive energy signature was forming at the edge of the solar system. Something big was coming through slipspace. "Vrecna reinforcements?" Shaw asked, his heart sinking. Park studied the readings, her face unreadable. "Possibly. The signature is large. Very large." In the Vrecna command ship, Hive Commander Thaxis received the same sensor data. He clicked his mandibles in satisfaction. His reinforcements had arrived early. Now the final assault could begin. The humans had fought well, better than expected, but their resistance was about to end. "Prepare all ground forces," Thaxis ordered. "When our ships arrive, we attack with everything. No more testing. No more probing. We crush them completely." Back in the colony, the human soldiers watched their screens and waited. Some prayed. Some wrote final messages to families they might never see again. Some simply cleaned their weapons and prepared for the end. Commander Park stood at the main view screen, watching the slipspace rupture grow larger and larger. She had sent her message to Earth 4 days ago. She had explained everything: the attack, the civilians, the inadequate council response. She had asked for help. Now she would find out if humanity had answered. The rupture began to open, tearing a hole in the fabric of space. Light poured through, and ships began to emerge. Shaw held his breath. The first vessel that came through was massive, human, a carrier-class warship, its hull painted with the flag of Earth. Behind it came more ships. And more. And more. Park let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. "It seems Earth got my message." Shaw stared at the screen in disbelief. "How many ships is that?" 12. A full battle group. And they're deploying troop carriers. Park finally allowed herself to smile. The Vrecna asked for a fight. They're about to get one. The voice that came through the colony's communication system was strong and clear, cutting through the static of battle damage and failing systems. "Veltri 7. This is Colonel Nathan Drake of the 42nd Human Expeditionary Regiment. We received your distress call. Sorry, we're a bit late." Captain Shaw grabbed the microphone, his hand shaking. "Colonel Drake, this is Captain Shaw. You have no idea how good it is to hear your voice. What's your strength?" 12 warships, Captain. 3,200 ground troops. Full armor support, air cover, and enough ammunition to fight for a month. Drake paused. "We heard you folks needed some help." Shaw couldn't speak. He turned to look at Commander Park, who was smiling wider than he had ever seen Dot in the refugee shelters. Ambassador Kieth heard the transmission through the emergency speakers. He didn't understand at first. The Galactic Council had promised 50 soldiers. That was the standard response for a minor border incident. 50 soldiers arriving in 6 days. Instead, thousands of humans had crossed the stars in 4 days, bringing an army. "I don't understand," Kia said to Park when she came to explain. "We asked for reinforcements. A small peacekeeping force. Why did they send so many?" "Because you're our friends, Ambassador. And humans don't do small when our friends are in danger." Park put a hand on the old Corvani's shoulder. "You asked the Galactic Council for help. I asked Earth. There's a difference." Above the planet, the Vrecna fleet reacted with confusion. Hive Commander Thaxis had expected his own reinforcements. Instead, human warships had appeared, more than he had ever seen gathered in one place. His tactical officers were scrambling to recalculate, to adjust their plans for this unexpected development. "How many human soldiers?" Thaxis demanded. "Thousands, Commander. Ground forces are preparing to deploy. Dax's mandibles clicked with frustration. This changed everything. His ground forces outnumbered the human defenders 5-1, but against fresh troops with full equipment, those numbers meant nothing. Humans were dangerous enough when they were tired and wounded. Fresh humans with armor and air support. Colonel Drake's voice came through on the open channel, broadcasting to both the colony and the Vrekner fleet. Vrekner, Commander. This is Colonel Nathan Drake of Earth's military forces. You have attacked a peaceful colony and killed innocent civilians. You have one chance to withdraw your forces immediately. If you refuse, we will destroy you. You have 5 minutes to respond. In the Vrekner command ship, Daxus considered his options. His fleet was slightly larger than the human force, but human ships were notoriously well armed. A space battle would be costly, possibly fatal. But surrender? Retreat? The Dominion did not retreat. We do not negotiate with mammals, Daxus replied. Your ground forces are welcome to try. My soldiers will feast on their bones. So be it, Drake said simply. The human fleet moved into attack formation, but they didn't immediately engage the Vrekner ships. Instead, they positioned themselves to provide cover for the troop carriers that were already beginning their descent toward the planet. Major Claire Bennett stood in the lead dropship, checking her equipment one final time. She was Colonel Drake's second-in-command, a tactical genius who had planned more combat operations than she could count. This one would be different. This one was personal. Listen up, she told the soldiers packed into the carrier. Down there are humans and Corvani civilians who have been fighting for their lives for 4 days. The Vrekner think they've already won. We're going to teach them how wrong they are. The soldiers responded with a unified shout, their voices mixing into a single roar of determination. We hit hard. We hit fast, and we don't stop until every enemy is dead or surrendered. These people are counting on us. Let's not disappoint them. The dropships entered the atmosphere like falling stars, dozens of them, streaking through the orange clouds toward the surface. Vrekner anti-aircraft batteries opened fire, but human fighters swept ahead, clearing a path with precise missile strikes. On the ground, Sergeant Cole watched the sky fill with human ships. After 4 days of fighting, of watching friends die, of holding on with nothing but willpower and desperation, he had almost forgotten what hope felt like. Would you look at that? He whispered. Beside him, the young Corvani child he had shared his rations with tugged at his sleeve. Are those your people? Yeah, kid. Those are my people. Will they save us? Cole picked up his rifle, feeling new strength flow through his exhausted body. They already have. The first dropships landed inside the colony's defensive perimeter, and human soldiers poured out in perfect formation. Fresh troops in clean armor, carrying weapons that gleamed with readiness. They immediately began reinforcing the battered defensive positions, bringing heavy equipment and supplies. A young lieutenant found Captain Shaw and snapped a crisp salute. Lieutenant Ethan Vance, sir. Colonel Drake sends his regards and asks where you need us most. Shaw almost laughed. After days of desperate fighting with dwindling resources, he suddenly had more help than he knew what to do with. The eastern perimeter is about to collapse. We've got wounded who need evacuation. And someone should probably tell the Corvani civilians that they're going to be okay. Already on it. Sir. Vance turned and began issuing orders to his troops with practiced efficiency. Colonel Drake himself arrived in the second wave of dropships. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and eyes that had seen too many battlefields. But when he shook Shaw's hand, his grip was warm. Hell of a job holding out, Captain. Earth is proud of you. We did what we had to do, Colonel. Couldn't let these people down. Drake nodded, understanding completely. That's what humans do. Now, let's finish this. The counterattack began within the hour. Human forces pushed outward from the colony, driving the Vrekner back from positions they had held for days. Tanks rolled across the rocky terrain. Aircraft screamed overhead, striking enemy concentrations with devastating precision. Infantry advanced in coordinated waves, supported by artillery that turned Vrekner strongpoints into craters. Major Bennett led a strike team toward the enemy communication arrays. If they could knock out Vrekner coordination, the enemy would fall into chaos. She moved through the battlefield like a ghost, her team cutting through defenders with surgical precision. "Target in sight," her point man reported. "Take it down," Bennett ordered. Explosions bloomed across the Vrekner communication hub. Within minutes, their ability to coordinate was gone. What had been an organized military force became scattered groups of confused soldiers, each fighting a lone dot in his command ship. Daxus watched his tactical display with growing horror. The humans weren't just fighting. They were systematically destroying his army. Every tactic he tried, they countered. Every position he fortified, they flanked. They moved through his forces like a blade through water. "This is impossible," he snarled. "They are mammals. Soft creatures from a soft world. How are they doing this?" His officers had no answer. They had studied human military capabilities, had calculated their strengths and weaknesses. But the calculations had been wrong. The numbers had been incomplete. They had measured human weapons and vehicles and soldiers. They had not measured human determination that by nightfall, the Vrekner ground forces had been pushed back to their original landing zones. Half their soldiers were dead or captured. Their air support had been destroyed. Their communication was gone, and the humans kept coming. Colonel Drake stood on a ridge overlooking the battlefield, watching the final Vrekner positions collapse. Beside him, Commander Park surveyed the victory they had won together. "The Council is going to be furious," Park said. "We deployed military forces without authorization." "Let them be furious," Drake replied. "We did what was right. That's all that matters. What happens now?" Drake turned to look at the colony behind them, where lights were beginning to flicker back on, where Kravani and humans were emerging from shelters, realizing that the nightmare was ending, where hope was returning. "Now we make sure this never happens again." The Vrekna wanted to test humanity. They got their answer. The battle for Veltri 7 entered its final phase on the 5th day. Hive Commander Thatsis had gathered his remaining forces into a single fortified position near the original landing zone. He had perhaps 800 soldiers left from the thousands he had started with. Behind him, his dropships waited for evacuation. Above him, the human fleet had established complete orbital control. He was trapped. But Vrekna did not surrender. "Commander," his tactical officer reported, "human forces are surrounding our position. They will attack within the hour." "Let them come," Thaxis replied. "We will make them pay for every meter of ground." Colonel Drake studied the enemy position from a forward observation post. Major Bennett was beside him, along with Captain Shaw and Lieutenant Vance. The four officers examined the fortifications that the Vrekner had built during the night. "They're dug in deep," Bennett observed. "Defensive barriers, anti-vehicle weapons, probably mines around the perimeter. A direct assault would be costly." "Costly but effective," Vance said. "We have the numbers now. We can overwhelm them." Shaw shook his head. "Those defensive positions were built by good engineers. The Vrekna know they're going to die. That makes them more dangerous, not less. Men with nothing to lose fight hardest." Drake listened to his officers' debate, then made his decision. "We're not going to throw lives away needlessly. Major Bennett, take your team around the eastern flank. There's a blind spot in their sensor coverage that we identified during the night assault. Hit their power generators. Without power, their defensive weapons go offline," Bennett nodded. Smart. Lieutenant Vance, your mechanized units will create a diversion on the western approach. Make noise, draw attention, but don't commit fully until we're ready. Understood. Sir. Captain Shaw, your people have earned a rest. But I suspect you won't take one. Shaw managed a tired smile. We started this fight, Colonel. We'd like to finish it. Then coordinate with the artillery teams. When Bennett's assault succeeds, we bring down fire on their command structure. Cut off the head, and the body dies. The assault began at midday. Lieutenant Vance's mechanized units rolled toward the Vrechner western perimeter, their tanks firing ranging shots that kept the enemy focused in that direction. The Vrechner responded with everything they had, pouring fire toward the human armor. Meanwhile, Major Bennett and her strike team moved silently through a rocky canyon on the eastern approach. The Vrechner sensors had a gap here, a small one, but big enough for soldiers on foot. Bennett had identified it during her earlier attack on their communications, and now she exploited it perfectly. Her team reached the power generators without being detected. The structures hummed with energy, feeding power to the weapons that kept the human forces at bay. Charges set, her demolitions expert reported. Fall back to safe distance. The explosions were precise and devastating. 3 generators went up simultaneously, their destruction cascading through the Vrechner power grid. Defensive turrets went dark. Shield emitters failed. The fortress that Thaxis had built became suddenly vulnerable. Artillery, fire for effect, Drake ordered. The bombardment was terrible and brief. Human shells rained down on the Vrechner command structure, collapsing bunkers and destroying vehicle parks. Thaxis's carefully organized defense crumbled under the assault. Then the infantry moved in. Sergeant Cole led his squad through the breach in the western wall, fighting alongside fresh troops from the 42nd Regiment. After 4 days of desperate defense, the chance to finally attack felt almost dreamlike. But the bullets were real, and so was the enemy resistance. The Vrechner fought with the savagery of creatures who knew death was coming. They emerged from collapsed bunkers, charged from smoking ruins, attacked with weapons and claws and mandibles. Cole saw soldiers fall on both sides, the price of victory paid in blood, but humans had paid that price before. They kept advancing. In the center of the fortress, Thaxis made his final gamble. He gathered his elite guard, 50 of his best warriors, and led them toward the refugee shelters at the edge of the battlefield. If he could take hostages, he might still salvage something from this disaster. The humans valued civilian lives. They would negotiate. He never reached the shelters. The path that should have led to hundreds of helpless prisoners instead led to empty buildings. The Kovanni were gone. All of them. Evacuated hours before the final assault began. Thaxis turned to find Colonel Drake waiting for him, backed by a squad of human soldiers with weapons raised. Looking for someone? Drake asked calmly. Where are the prisoners? Thaxis demanded. There are no prisoners. We moved the civilians to our ships before the assault. They're safe. Beyond your reach. Thaxis's mandibles clicked with frustrated rage. You anticipated this? We anticipated everything. Drake stepped forward, his eyes hard. That's what humans do. We plan. We prepare. We protect our own. Your own? The Kovanni are not your species. They're our friends. That's enough. Thaxis straightened, trying to maintain what dignity he had left. You cannot kill me. I am a hive commander of the Vrechner Dominion. There are rules of war, protocols. I'm not going to kill you, Drake replied. You're going to stand trial for attacking a civilian population. You're going to answer for every life you took here. And then the galaxy is going to see what happens to those who target the innocent. My empire will not allow this. They will send 100 fleets to avenge this defeat. Drake didn't flinch. Then we'll send 100 regiments. 1,000 if we need to. That's the thing about humans, Commander. There's always more of us willing to fight for what's right. By sunset, the battle was over. The remaining Vrekner soldiers had surrendered or been captured. Their ships in orbit, surrounded by human warships, had chosen to stand down rather than face destruction. Valtteri 7 was free. The cost had been heavy. Shaw's original security force of 30 had been reduced to 14 survivors. The 42nd Regiment had lost 62 soldiers in the final assault. Human and Corvani blood had soaked into the rocky soil of the colony, but more than 500 civilians were alive. The colony still stood, and the Vrekna had learned a lesson they would never forget. That night, the survivors gathered in the colony's central plaza for a moment of quiet. Corvani and humans stood together, their differences forgotten in the shared relief of survival. Ambassador Kiev spoke words of gratitude in his own language, then in English, thanking the humans who had died to protect his people. Medic Torres finally sat down for the first time in 5 days, her hands still stained with the blood of those she had tried to save. Sergeant Cole found the Corvani child he had befriended and learned that the child's name was Kyrie. They sat together watching the stars. No longer filled with enemy ships, Captain Shaw and Commander Park stood at the edge of the gathering, watching their people celebrate and mourn at the same time. "We did it," Shaw said quietly. "We did," Park agreed. "But this isn't the end. The Vrekner will remember this. The galaxy will remember this. Is that a bad thing?" Park considered the question. "Maybe not. Maybe it's time the galaxy understood what humanity really is. Not conquerors. Not aggressors. Just people who don't abandon their friends." Above them, the human fleet held position, their lights blinking steadily against the darkness. Protectors. Guardians. A promise to the galaxy that human friendship meant something real. Something worth fighting for. The message had been sent, and the universe was listening. 1 week after the battle, the Galactic Council's peacekeeping force finally arrived at Valtteri 7. 50 soldiers in light armor stepped off their transport to find the colony already rebuilt and the war already won. Representative Morath, the Council's official envoy, was a tall being with gray skin and 3 eyes that seemed permanently narrowed with disapproval. He surveyed the human warships still in orbit, the human soldiers patrolling the colony perimeter, and the human flag flying alongside the Corvani banner over the main facility. "This is highly irregular," he announced to no one in particular. Colonel Drake met him at the landing pad, his uniform clean but his eyes tired from a week of coordinating reconstruction efforts. "Representative Morath, welcome to Valtteri 7. I demand an explanation, Colonel. Human military forces were deployed into Council space without authorization. This is a violation of the Galactic Accords. With respect, Representative, our people were dying. Our friends were in danger. We didn't need permission to save them. That is not how interstellar diplomacy works." Ambassador Kiev stepped forward, his blue feathers bright with restored health and confidence. "Perhaps it should be, Representative. While your council debated procedures and protocols, these humans crossed the stars to protect my people. They bled for us. They died for us. What did your 50 soldiers do?" Morath had no answer. The representative spent 2 days investigating the situation, interviewing survivors, reviewing battle records. He compiled a lengthy report that criticized humanity's unilateral action while reluctantly acknowledging that the colony would have fallen without their intervention. The report was filed with the Council and largely ignored. But the story of Valtteri 7 did not stay buried in diplomatic archives. News of the battle spread across the galaxy through countless channels. Traders carried the tale from port to port. Diplomats whispered it in council chambers. Soldiers discussed it in barracks and wardrooms across 1,000 worlds. The story grew with each telling, but the core remained the same. A Corvani colony had been attacked. The Council had offered token help. The humans had sent an army, species that had never considered. Humanity beyond the minor power in a distant sector began to reconsider. Ambassadors started paying closer attention when humans spoke. Diplomats began seeking human alliances. And across the galaxy, the message was clear. If you were a friend of humanity, you were never truly alone. Captain Shaw spent the week after the battle recovering from his wounds and rebuilding his security force. The colonial authority offered him a promotion and a transfer to a prestigious position on Earth. He turned it down. "My place is here," he told Commander Park. "These people trusted me to protect them. I'm not leaving until that job is done. You know the Vrekner might come back someday." Shaw looked out the window at the Corvani workers repairing the last of the battle damage. Children played in the courtyard, their laughter echoing off the walls. "Then we'll be ready for them." Sergeant Cole also chose to stay. He had been offered a medal for his actions during the siege. But the honor that meant most to him was a small carved token that Kyrie had given him, a symbol of eternal friendship in Corvani culture. "You saved my life," Kyrie told him in their improving English. "We are family now." Cole looked at the small carving, then at the young Corvani who had somehow survived 4 days of hell because humans had refused to give up. "Yeah, kid. I guess we are." Medic Torres returned to Earth with the regiment but promised to visit. She had formed bonds with the Corvani medical staff during the crisis, sharing knowledge and techniques that both species would benefit from. The tragedy had created connections that would last for generations. Major Bennett received a commendation for her tactical brilliance during the assault. She accepted it quietly, knowing that medals didn't bring back the 62 soldiers who had died under her command. Each of their names was carved on a memorial stone in the colony's central plaza, alongside the names of Shaw's 14 fallen defenders. 2 weeks after the battle, Colonel Drake and Commander Park shared a quiet drink in the officers' lounge of the Relentless, still in orbit above the colony. The reconstruction was nearly complete. The regiment would be departing soon, returning to Earth for reassignment. "The Council has filed a formal complaint about our actions," Park said, studying her glass. "They're calling it unauthorized military intervention." "Let them complain." Drake took a long sip of his drink. "We did what was right. History will judge us fairly. And if the Vrekner send their 100 fleets, then we'll send our 100 regiments. And after that, 100 more." Drake set down his glass and looked out the viewport at the planet below, now peaceful and healing. "That's who we are, Park. We're not the biggest species in the galaxy. We're not the strongest or the most advanced. But when our friends need us, we show up. Every time, some species will see that as a threat. Some will. Others will see it as exactly what they've been looking for." Drake smiled slightly. "The galaxy has plenty of powerful species willing to conquer. What it needs are species willing to protect." A communication light blinked on the console nearby. Drake answered it, and his expression shifted as he listened to the message. When he finished, he turned to Park with a familiar look in his eyes. "Another colony?" She guessed. "Another species. The Volturi. They're a small civilization on the edge of the outer rim. They've detected hostile ships approaching their homeworld, and they're asking for help. Did they contact the Council?" "They contacted us directly. Said they heard what we did at Veltri 7 and wanted to know if the stories were true." Park stood up, setting aside her drink. "What did you tell them?" "I told them to hold on. That help was coming." The Relentless began turning toward the edge of the system, its navigation computers calculating a course to distant stars. Behind it, the rest of the human fleet moved into formation. 3,000 soldiers checked their weapons and prepared for another deployment. On the surface of Veltri 7, Ambassador Kiath watched the human ships depart. Beside him stood Elder Sela and young Kyrie. all three of them looking up at the sky with mixed feelings of gratitude and hope. "They are leaving," Kyrie said sadly. "They are needed elsewhere," Kieth replied. "But they will return if we need them." "That is what humans do. Why?" Selah asked. "Why do they fight for species not their own?" Kieth considered the question that had haunted him since the day the human regiment had arrived. He thought about Commander Park's words about family and choice. He thought about Sergeant Cole sharing his last meal with a frightened child. He thought about soldiers dying in corridors they had no obligation to defend. "Because that is who they are," he finally answered. "Humans do not measure friendship in distance or difference. They measure it in willingness to stand beside you in the darkness. And once you are their friend, they will cross the universe to keep you safe." The human fleet disappeared into slipspace, chasing another call for help, another species in need. Behind them, the story of Veltris 7 continued to spread, carrying a simple message to every corner of the galaxy. When you call for human help, you don't get soldiers. You get family.